Video. Today we're going to be talking about some more Star Wars Unlimited. Yesterday we took a look at the Luke leader card. Today we're going to be doing for his Dark Dare Dad. We're going to talk about Darth Vader in Star Wars Unlimited and the leader card that you're going to get in the starter deck that comes out with the game. Now, a couple things to note before we get right into talking about this card and all the cards that I think work pretty well with him. None of these suggestions of cards are going to be extremely meta. I'm not going to say any of these cards are bad. I'm not going to say any of them are good. I'm going to say that from first glance that I like these cards with this character, and if I were to build this character, these were the cards I'd be first taking a look at into making a deck with. Some of my picks may be absolutely amazing and some of them may be absolutely dog trash, but that's besides the point. The point is whether I think it's synergistic with the character. Also, that being said, I do want to make a note of not every card that I do think is really good with this character is going to end up on this list. I'm only trying to talk about a few of them to keep this video as short as possible and as fun to watch for you guys as possible. That being said, let's talk about some Star Wars. Going to be looking at today is Darth Vader. He's going to come in the starter deck, and he's going to have the aggression and the villainy aspects. He's going to have a nice little action here. Well, first off, he's going to be Darth Vader, Dark Lord of the Sith. He is a title, of course. He's going to be a Force, Imperial, and Sith character, or leader, unit, whatever you want to call it. Well, he's not a unit, not yet. He's a leader. But anyway, he's going to have an action where you get to pay one resource and exhaust him. And if you do, and if you have played a villainous card this phase, you can deal 1 damage to a unit and 1 damage to a base. Beautiful. Great ability, in my personal opinion. Is very aggressive. It's going to allow you to do some burn damage. It's going to allow you to bypass some of your opponent's different abilities they may have on the field. It's going to allow you to easily knock off those pesky shield tokens that may end up on the field and may end up bothering you. What? Not that card. Let's see if we can find it here. Those pesky shield tokens. Yeah, so there we go. Sorry. So yeah, those pesky shield tokens that your opponent's going to put on their characters is going to absorb a bunch of damage potentially. Well, with this ability, you can just say, well, we're going to ping it and knock it off the unit, and also deal some damage to your opponent's base in the process. Okay. That being said, what happens when you use his epic action? Well, if you control 7 or more resources, you can deploy this leader, flip him, ready him, and move him to the ground arena. And bam, you're going to get Darth Vader as a leader unit, a ground character. He's going to have 5 power and 8 defense. He's going to have Force and Imperial and Sith, and he's going to have ability that on attack, when you attack with him, that means you may deal 2 damage to a unit. So obviously he's going to be doing some more burn here. Darth Vader, this leader card, is all about burn. All about direct damage, bypassing the whole combat phase, sort of. Well, I mean, you're going to be doing some combat, obviously, or else you're not going to be able to win the game. But his whole thing is that's what you're sort of taking advantage of. That's his main gimmick, right? So there's 2 ways to really go aggressive with Vader, in my opinion. You can either go all in on burn, or you can also try to do a more sort of, I'm going to burn you, ping you here and here for burn, but I'm also going to overwhelm you with a bunch of different characters. And we're going to take a look at what either of those 2 things may look at within the game's sense. Again, not exactly going to be the most meta of options, but also options I think work pretty well with this leader. So, let's take a look. Obviously, if you're going to play him on aggression, you can play either the generic aggression bases, which is going to just have 30 health and the aggression symbol. I think Kestro City is going to be a more evil theme to play him with if you're going to do the generic base, or you can play him with Tarkin Town, which is going to end up being a ability to base with the 25 health. He's going to have an epic action. You can deal 3 damage to a damaged leader, non-leader unit. Sorry. So it's going to give you a little bit more burn there to play with your Darth Vader, because like I said, that's sort of the name of the game with this character. Me personally, I think going for Tarkin Town is actually a pretty good option. It's going to give you some extra burn there, and it's going to also, although the loss of life is not going to really happen much because your goal isn't to survive a long time, but to kill your opponent as fast as possible. Okay, so what are some of the cards you can play in your deck to use this with? So you can play Stormtrooper. Obviously, the Death Star Stormtrooper is a very Vader-centric card because it fits into that second category I talked about. It doesn't have any burn abilities, but it's a cheap buy that you can use to play multiple copies of and overwhelm your opponent with this card. It's going to allow you to take some pretty cool victories with, obviously, a Stormtrooper because, again, it's Darth Vader. Along that same note, you can play the Jedha agitator, right? So this is going to be another non-unique unit. It's going to be a rebel technically, but the whole point of this unit is that it has saboteur, which is when this unit attacks, it can ignore sentinel and it can defeat the defender's shield. Again, those pesky shields I was talking about earlier, those shields that are going to start to soak up some of your damage when you're trying to do things. This can just say, well, get rid of it. When your opponent's trying to slow you down with those sentinel cards, well, you can't attack my base, you're not going to be able to out aggro me. You ignore it with this card. And he also has a cool on attack ability that if you control a leader unit like Darth Vader, you can deal 2 damage to a ground or base unit, a ground unit or a base. So it's a cheap option here that's going to allow you to deal some direct damage potentially, but also bypass those pesky sentinel and shield abilities, right? So what's next? Next up, we have Saw Gerrera. So if you're playing Darth Vader on double aggression, you might as well take full advantage of those aggressive double aggression abilities. Saw Gerrera is one of the cool double aggression cards. He's only a 4 cost. He has 5 power and 4 defense. And as an additional cost for each opponent to play an event, they must deal 2 damage to their base. Now, obviously, your opponent could just not play events, but if they have a really event they want to play, but they say, oh, you know what, I really need to play this event, I'll play it and then take 2 damage to the base. Obviously, your opponent taking penalties for doing one of the basic actions in the game, like playing an event that can actually do a lot of things for them, and so they're probably going to want to just take that 2 damage anyway. It's a pretty cool ability. Obviously, they can also just kill Saw Gerrera, then go in and play their events, but it just gives them a bit of a harder time to make their decisions during gameplay. Another unit you can play, obviously, is Palpatine. Now, like I said, we're not really trying to survive a long time, so an 8 cost is pretty daunting at first, but the payoff is huge. He's a 6/6 with Overwhelm, which means when he's attacking an enemy unit and deals excess damage, he deals the excess damage, like so if he was attacking a unit with 2 health. Well, say he was attacking Saw Gerrera, for example. He has 6 power and he has 4 defense. Palpatine would kill Gerrera and deal 2 extra damage to your enemy's base. Also, when you play him, you deal 6 damage divided as you choose amongst enemy units. Like, it doesn't get any more burn than this. So when it comes to space units for Vader, you have a couple good options. You have, on Aggression Vader, you have the Imperial Interceptor. When you play, you can deal 3 damage to a space unit, just that simple, burning away your opponent. Now, most players aren't going to have a huge presence in the space arena, so having the ability to come in there and try to knock out some of their smaller or weaken some of their bigger units in the space arena and diminish their presence there even more is going to be a pretty big deal. And then you can have the Ruthless Raider, which is going to be another Space Arena card that you can possibly play with Vader, and it's going to have a beautiful ability where it can just deal 4 damage. It's going to have a 6 cost and 4 power, 6 defense, and it's going to have a beautiful ability that when you play it, or when it's defeated, you can deal 2 damage to an enemy base, and 2 damage to an enemy unit. So when you play this card for 6, you deal 2 damage to a base, or a base and a unit, 2 damage. And then when it gets killed eventually, if they ever do kill it, if they don't kill it, that's good for you because you can keep using it for attacks. But when they finally do kill it, or if they finally do kill it, you get to deal 2 damage to a base and 2 damage to an enemy unit. That being said, for the events, you have some great options here. Force Choke is obviously a classic with Vader. You can't be Vader without the choke. He's going to be able to, you can obviously use Force Choke. It's only a 2 cost event, and if you control a Force unit, this event only costs 1 less to play. Now, Darth Vader on his leader form is obviously a Force unit, but there's also a lot of other Force units that you can play onto the field. But deal 5 damage to a non-vehicle unit, that unit's controller draws a card. So obviously they're getting a little bit of card draw there from it, but 5 damage is nothing to scoff at, and it's going to be able to burn down your opponent pretty well there. Obviously, you're talking about Vader here, so we can also play Force Lightning. It's a 1 cost event, cheaper than Force Choke, and you can choose unit and it loses all abilities for the phase. Then, if you control a Force unit, you pay any number of resources to deal 2 damage to the chosen unit for each resource paid this way. So, obviously, you can pay 2 resources to play this card, essentially, and deal 2 damage to a unit and choose a unit to lose its abilities for the phase. You can use that lose abilities for the phase ability to get rid of the pesky Sentinel ability that you really don't like and stuff like that. So obviously it's going to be a really powerful ability event with Darth Vader here. And then, of course, there's some other events you can play, the aggression event. Now, when I glanced over this idea when I was on my previous video about Luke, but if you're playing a double up with a certain aspect, you might as well take full advantage of that fact. In aggression, the innate event for each aspect is a really important way to do that. So for aggression, they have a 4 cost event, and you can choose 2 in any order. Draw a card. You can defeat up to 2 upgrades. You can ready a unit with 3 or less power, or you can deal 4 damage to a unit. As Darth Vader, you can literally just go ahead, I'm not really sure if you can choose twice. But obviously, if you could deal up to 8 damage to a unit. But that seems like nuts good, right? So you can draw a card, deal 4 damage to a unit, which is a pretty good exchange. Paying 4 for 4 damage, which doesn't seem like much, but when it replaces itself as a different card, and card draw isn't all that powerful, and Star Wars Unlimited, so getting card draw where you can is really important. And then you have the Force Throw, which is another 1 cost event, which is going to be another Force event. You can choose a player. That player discards a card from their hand. Then, if you control a Force unit, you may deal damage to a unit equal to the cost of the discarded card, right? So, your opponent is going to be forced to discard a card. Like I just said before, card draw isn't all that powerful in Star Wars Unlimited. So, forcing your opponent to discard cards when you can and reducing their hand size can actually get you closer to winning games, because sometimes your opponent's going to be living off that the 2-draw top deck every round. And sometimes if they still need to ramp up to get to something bigger, they might be 1 card per phase type of deal, and it can get really oppressive really quickly. For the upgrades for Darth Vader, you can play obviously Vader's Saber. He is known to be a lightsaber duelist, one of the most powerful ones in the galaxy. So obviously you got to play his saber. It only costs 2. It gives him +3 damage and +1 defense, +3 power. And you can attach it to a non. You can only attach it to a non-vehicle unit. And when it's played, if it's attached to Darth Vader, you can deal 4 damage to a ground unit. So obviously doing a little bit more burn there. And then also for another upgrade that you might want to play, it's a 1 cost upgrade, and it gives them +1/+1, but then it gives the attached unit Saboteur, which means you can ignore Sentinel and Shield, like we were talking about earlier. It's a very powerful thing to do with Vader, because it's going to give you the ability to just ignore some of those abilities that are going to try to slow you down during the game. 2, if you don't want to play Darth Vader on double aggression, you can play him on command. Now, this is the base symbol that he comes with in the starter deck, and I think it's pretty good for Darth Vader's one of his overall game plans you can play him with, which is just overwhelm your opponent with a bunch of different mini units, and right, so you can just play a lot of different mini units and have different effects that trigger when you kill them, when they die, and so you can use them a lot to sort of overwhelm your opponent. Essentially, is all I'm really saying. It's like an average way to kill them. So obviously, I think you can play him really well with the Energy Conversion Lab. You can use the Epic Action to play a unit with a cost 6 or less from your hand and give it Ambush. Now, Ambush means that it can be attack. You can attack with it the turn you play it, which is a really powerful effect for a lot of different units. So being able to just choose any unit from your hand and give it Ambush and play it, absolutely beautiful. Of course, you have to go down to 25 health, but I don't think it's too big of a deal if you do. And then if you don't want to go down to 25 health, you can use the 30 health base, and that's completely fine as well. So what are some of the cards that come with the Command playset? Obviously one of the best cards in Command Villainous, like maybe a full playset of in every single Command Villainous deck. Probably till like the set rotates or something. I don't know. This is going to be the Super Laser Technician. It's only a 3-cost body, but it only has 2 in 1, so it's only 2 power, 1 defense, right? So it's really cheap, right? And it's really weak. But when it's defeated, you can put it into your resource row and ready it. Powerful effect, super powerful. Now remember, Darth Vader's character effect doesn't just say that you can only damage an enemy unit, right? It's any unit. You can kill this unit yourself to gain that extra resource if you feel that you need to. Not that you will always, or that it will always be that relevant to kill your own unit, but you could, and you could get that extra resource this turn, and it could turn into something else for a different effect. But the point is, it's a really powerful effect. Bottom on the field, your opponent decides to kill it. Well, guess what? I got another resource. What are you gonna do about it, right? Obviously, for Villainous in Command, you have Grand Moff Tarkin, a 4 cost, 2 damage, 3 defense. When you play, you can search the top 5 cards of your deck for 2 Imperial cards and reveal them, and then you can draw them and put the other cards to the bottom of your deck in any order you choose. Powerful effect, gets you those minions out to use. Powerful. You can play General Tag, right? So it's going to be a 2 cost Command Villainous 2/2. But when you play him, you can give experience tokens to up to 3 different trooper units, which is going to be like the Stormtrooper that you would spam onto the field. This is another type of trooper unit, the Vanguard Infantry. It's a 1 cost 1/2, but when it's defeated, you can give an experience token to a unit, so you can just buff up your other units really well with these buff up those cheap units and really overwhelm your opponent. If you want to know what experience unit token actually looks like, that's what an experience token is. It just gives you +1/+1, so you can use it to power up your units. For events, you can play Emperor's Legion. It's a 2 cost event. Return each unit in your discard pile that was defeated this phase to your hand. All those cheap units you played, you kill them, they come back to play again. Like I said earlier in this video, card draw isn't super gated in Star Wars Unlimited. But if you don't build your deck right, you could end up running out of cards really quickly. Just getting more options in your hand for later turns, absolutely powerful. And then, of course, you can play Recruit. Talked about it in the Luke video, and I'll probably talk about it in every command video in the future. It's just a cheap card that allows you to search out a unit, reveal it, and put it into your hand, which is going to be really powerful for almost every command deck. I mean, searching cards has always been powerful in every game, and it's just not going to change this time around. It's not going to all of a sudden become a bad ability to get your hands on. Now, that being said, for just simply villainous units, I kind of, again, glazed over this in the Luke video, but there are simply units that are just villainous or heroism, right? But, so what will some of them look like? So this is TIE Fighter. It's a cheap unit again. 1 cost, 1 defense, 2 power. Play it, it's cheap. Admiral Mahdi is actually a really powerful effect for the villainous whole game plan here of killing your own units. Because when he's defeated, you can ready another villainous unit. You have other villainous units on the field, you ready them up, and you can go in and swing again, overwhelm your opponent with a bunch of cheap units. Sort of the second game plan that I was talking about, and Mahdi only plays into that right there. Then you have, of course, a very funny event here that is very thematic with Vader. Pay 3, I am your father. You can deal 7 damage, so that's the burn aspect of Vader, to an enemy unit unless its controller says no, or rather, if you really want to be thematic, no, right? So then if they do that, then you get to draw 3 cards. So you don't get the damage, sadly, but you get the extra card draw, which can become very important later in the game. Like I said, card draw is not super gated, but if you don't pay attention, you could run out of cards pretty quickly. And that's going to be it for the Vader side of things. So that's just talking about Vader and some of the cool things that he can do. I kind of just talked about a lot of it really quickly there. But the point is that you have 2 options when you're playing as Vader. You can either burn your opponent down to the ground, or you can try to overwhelm them with a bunch of different units and different characters like that, smaller units, and kill your own units, and that sort of gameplay that Villainous does. So you can either play him really well into Aggression or Villainous, or sort of that sort of idea. But that's going to be it for today's video. Stay tuned for tomorrow. We're going to go over some more units in the future, some units from the actual booster set this time, maybe some that you guys haven't seen before. And we're going to talk about what cards I think work pretty well with them. Stay tuned, stay excited, stay happy, stay ready to play some Star Wars Unlimited. Only a couple weeks to go.